Hey, what's up, everybody? Welcome back to season 2 of Conversations in Pop Culture, where I have with me comic writer and creator Dustin Staab from Rabbit Rhino Comics. And also, you currently have a Kickstarter, sort of, that you're a part of. So, welcome to the show.
Thanks for having me. I appreciate it.
Yeah, I'm very excited because obviously I've been taking a look at that Kickstarter. It's an anthology that's an interconnecting but also very individual stories set in the same world called Tales from Kara Prime. And a lot of stuff's going on. I think there's 3 days left in the Kickstarter. So what is Tales from Kara Prime dealing with, and what is it about, and what is the basic premise of it? For those who might not have heard about it and might not have gotten into it and just want to know what we're going to talk about before we dive too deep into it.
Sure. Tales from Kara Prime is based on characters that are in Brian Silverback's Kara Prime Collected Universe. So probably a year ago, maybe a little less than a year ago, he crowdfunded his handbook, which is the Kara Prime Handbook. And within there, you have basically bios for all of these characters. So what he did is he put a feeler out and asked if anyone was interested in, writing some short stories for these characters. And that's how I kind of got involved. I was just like, yeah, heck yeah, please. And why he accepted me, I'm not 100% sure, as I have zero published experience. But I've been a friend of his for a while, and we've collaborated on a couple of different things. So everyone kind of took a character, wrote a short story for that character, and it's all thrown into this anthology. There's so many creators in it. It's mind blowing.
Yeah, to talk a little bit about that, because it is sort of crazy, because there's some big names involved. There's some big indie names involved. And then there's people who are brand new, who have no comic book experience. And obviously what I mean by that is have no professional comic book experience. Obviously, looking at your wall, you are a collector. You've been reading comics for years, I can tell. I've seen some YouTube videos of you showing off your room to people. So obviously you are very versed in comics per se, but writing a comic is a whole different ballgame. And so what was that like, jumping into writing a comic? And then also writing somebody else's character they develop, but also having some free reign with it as well. Because it is a very cool, tricky situation that you're taking somebody's basic concept and you're expanding it. But there are rules, I would imagine, too.
Yeah, so I have a few comics that I've written for my own label, the Rabbit Rhino Comics label, but that's
they're not out yet. They're not out.
It's all theoretical right now. It's all theoretical.
They're in the process of being published. As we're modifying it, in which that they're gonna come out. They're in the process of being published.
Eventually, but yeah, it was an exciting opportunity. I flipped through the handbook. I kind of landed on Blacksmith as this character that I felt like I could write a fun story for. We're talking about 5 pages, so we're not talking about writing a dissertation or anything, and we're not even talking about an origin story, really. We're just talking about a fun little tale. And as far as the writing process, Brian was pretty liberal with what he allowed us to do. My original draft, both him and JT Malloy, my artist, will probably openly admit that my original draft was more like a 12 to 20 page. It may have been a dissertation, so it had to be reeled back in, which JT did a large chunk of helping me out with that.
So let's talk a little bit about this, because obviously you get 5 pages, you write obviously more. Writing more in many cases is easier than writing less. Writing short is a very difficult task to do. People who write short, it's a very skilled thing, and I learned that lesson where I used to basically run my website and write a bunch of articles, and I tried to limit myself to 500 to 600 words. And then you got to get to the point where you got to be creative too, and every word counts. It's a really good skill. And so what was that experience like for you? Because you're a new comic writer in many ways. You have a character that you didn't invent, but you got to tell a story. And obviously your character gets thrown into a world. And what was that entire experience like? Because I would imagine it's cool, but also really frustrating at the same time. Because it's like, you're like, oh man, I really want to write this character. I want people to feel this character. And I want people to actually have something to bite into. And when you have 5 or 6 pages, every panel matters.
Yeah, absolutely. And, you can't just throw 12 panels on a page. So, working with JT, what we did is we kind of took the script that I had. Obviously, he pre-read it and kind of looked through it. And he storyboarded as we kind of went through the story in order to help us pick out what pieces really need to be shown. And, it in some essences, as the writer, you're kind of like, well, I really would have liked to have this panel here to just show a little more emotion. But from a storytelling standpoint, it makes sense to kick something aside in order to fit the story and to make it flow well on the pages.
And to even talk about it, because we might as well show what Blacksmith looks like. And that's one image of Blacksmith. This might be a better one. Obviously, that's a really tough one. And then this is the one that also is awesome. And this is some promotional stuff with it. And so obviously, Blacksmith is a fascinating character where he is a veteran combatant guy who was dealing with alien intruders. He can sense, disturbances in what I guess is the Force in the Kara Prime world, and in particular interdimensional wormholes. And very much he's retired. I guess he's minding his own business. He's sick of fighting to some degree, and he gets transported to this world of Kara Prime, and he doesn't know why. And it's kind of crazy, his entire backstory to that degree. So what was that like? Because now your story with him sort of is like he just wakes up or is transported into this world, and he's like, what do I do now? And he kind of picks up, I guess, his axe and his blacksmith tools, and he's going to just deal with what he always knows how to do, but he wants to go home too. And we get that sense, and it's very humanizing in many ways. We have this warrior who is picking up the thing because he wants to go back home. And he's trying to find a way how to go back home. So it's cool. And the 5 pages, obviously the handbook helps. And then your 5 pages, we get a real sense of who this character is in a very short amount of time.
I hope so. I mean, obviously we didn't have time to write an origin story. And some of that background that you just mentioned isn't necessarily going to be in the Kara Prime, Tales from Kara Prime anthology. But I've tried to put it out there in the world, and hopefully that kind of gives people a sense. If they didn't happen to have the handbook, obviously there's going to be a little bit of difference between the handbook and what we've created for the blacksmith's character, because I've created some elements. Brian gave me some liberty to create like a sidekick for him and kind of tweak his backstory a little bit. So.
Yeah, and obviously I find his sidekick to be funny. It's this falcon named Swift. And it's kind of funny, and you don't expect the falcon. And obviously I viewed it as a funny thing. Not necessarily, I don't know how it was meant to be viewed and how it's meant to be interpreted, but I find it as a nice breakup from what's going on, because obviously we have a character who's thrown into turmoil. Even though this guy, and also what I like about him, and it's going to sort of go where I'm politically standing for a second here, I'm sure everybody knows, but I like how Blacksmith is saying, well, I'm here now, and instead of whining and bitching, he says, well, I'm going to fight interspecies intruding creatures into this world, and hopefully I can get back home. And he's now dealing with the problem, and he's going about his life to deal with it at the same time, which I just love, because it's like he's saying, okay, look, the fastest way for me to get back home is to figure out what's going on in this world, and then hopefully I could get back home. And so that's kind of nice to have that in there. And I think it's really cool to have a character who's sort of taking charge and forging his own destiny in many ways.
And it does, and it helps that, doing what he does, which is track down these wormholes, maybe he finds one that just happens to lead back home as well. So he kind of just picks up where he left off when he got deposited into Kara Prime. And, the overarching theme is all of these characters have kind of been brought to this Kara Prime world for this unknown reason by this unknown entity. And, there's a lot that still needs to be discovered.
Yeah, and that's the other thing about this is that there's either 14 or 15 other stories that are in this book. And so what we're really getting in this book, and I think it plays into your story, is that we're getting a very small snapshot of some of these characters, and then you get the handbook, and you add that in there, and you get even a little bit more information. And some of that information has sort of changed because obviously you have liberties, and obviously Brian is very much like an overseer, and he's very much like the Watcher in Marvel. And in that in which he's watching the world, and who knows, there might be a volume 2 of this, and the Watcher might come into play to some degree at some point. It would not, just saying there's a lot of ways this can go, but we're getting a snapshot of a lot of these people and a lot of these characters, and that opens up a lot of room for things to have their own stories in these books. And have, 4 or 5, stories that are self-contained for them. But then also, Blacksmith can cross over with another character, or then 4 other characters could wind up crossing over with Blacksmith. And, possibly one of these characters can kill another one of these characters. I mean, it's really endless. So what is that like? This book really does give that, because it's all the same world. It's not a traditional anthology where it's just like, I got 8 pages, and then what happens in my story has no consequence on what happens in somebody else's story. So it's kind of cool to that degree.
And that's kind of the future to Kara Prime that Brian's setting up, is that, I write for Blacksmith on this anthology. Maybe I write for something else on the other anthology, and somehow those characters interact, or as an independent creator, I have this intellectual property that I bring into the world of Kara Prime that interacts with the characters that are in the Kara Prime world, and then just kind of goes about on their way. So there's a lot of different ways in order to involve independent creators across all the spectrums into this shared universe. And then hopefully, as a fan, you're rolling down Artist Alley and you're like, well, I have this book that has, that Jonathan Hedrick wrote this part, that David Galliano wrote this part. And you have all these people I can go take this book to and be like, hey, I really liked your story here. And then, they have their own properties that have gone in and out. And it's just, it's a way to unite that whole creative world.
And I even think with this in particular, what's super cool is that I could see having, for you for the next 4 volumes, if there is 4 volumes of Kara Prime, that maybe Blacksmith has its own story, but then maybe 3 or 4 other characters in this book then all interact with each other. And then at some point, Blacksmith then goes and interacts with these 4 characters, and then Blacksmith's story goes right through these characters, and then other things get brought in, and then, we get bigger and bigger, and then all of a sudden it could very well be that there could be an entire Blacksmith saga that is funded on Kickstarter that takes place in Kara Prime, but is not necessarily an anthology, where this in many ways can be a launching point for a lot of these characters, and then certain characters could leave Kara Prime and then other things can come in, and it can be very, very interesting to that degree. I think of it like Super Smash Brothers, where some games...
That's a very good equilibration, I think.
Yeah, and I think it gets the point across where, at certain points, certain characters have left Smash for a game, and then they come back in later on. And, I'm a strong believer that I love world building, and I like to believe that all Nintendo lives in the same world, and that those characters were technically summoned to Super Smash. Even though that's technically not the story, it's a really good way to look at it. If you want continuality and you want that story idea, that's kind of what it is to some degree. And then certain characters leave because they might have been summoned out, for lack of a better word here. And so, because that's also the continuality problem. That's how I'm viewing Kara Prime, is I'm viewing it as a gigantic playing field for characters to come in and out. And I think it's awesome. And for also characters, because also the other thing about this is that, and I'm curious how you feel, is that it could very well be that people love Blacksmith, but they hate another character in this. And that, Brian says, oh man, Blacksmith is the most popular character. We got to spin this out of Kara Prime, and we got to keep it under the Kara Prime name, but Blacksmith needs to have 20 pages next issue. And then, So yes, so like that's also another possibility. Not saying I'm not trying to, you know, throw ideas out there per se or play favorites here, but I think
Well, that's part of what Brian plans to do. He does have, like, so the next step is Kara Prime Presents, which are basically Floppy's, like, individual stories of these characters that, you know, yeah, and he's kind of got an idea of where he's going with those. But ultimately, like every year, maybe there's going to be the anthology aspect of it, and then, you know, there's so many characters that it's hard to just keep launching floppies for everything.
It's also got very much a heavy metal feel to it.
Oh yeah. And yeah, it's gotten that comparison quite often. But I think that, you know, the difference is that it's all one connected world.
And I think that that's why this is fascinating to me, because whatever happens, and also even going beyond the characters, because obviously a lot of these characters are in different parts of this planet. And so we also, every 5 pages or every 8 pages or so, we're getting a different aspect of the world. And that's also another thing that's very cool, is that we're getting a very worldly approach to a book and to a comic and to them being summoned. And obviously information might be revealed with one character that's not revealed in the other, but it changes the way you read that other character. And it's very cool on how this is set up. And I think it's really a clever idea, because too many times anthologies are not connecting. And when anthologies connect, and I know Travis Gibb has his anthology connects with Cthulhu Invades Oz, and it's definitely a very different reading experience. So what is that even like for you to be part of a book that is this connection, and that everything can be read individually, but everything is connected at the same time?
Yeah, no, it's very cool, because, you know, we had to. So this particular anthology doesn't have as much of that interconnectedness as it will going forward, because we're kind of introducing the characters. But we still had to make sure, so like the background scenery, you know, what kind of world are they living in? You know, JT had to go to Brian and make sure that how he drew things kind of jived with what the overall theme of things were. And you talk about Brian as kind of this watcher. Well, from this anthology, that's what he's going to have to do. He's going to have to say, okay, well, this is where we're going. So these characters kind of have to start following this path. And he'll have to be a little more involved with how that universe develops, and, you know, what ultimately he wants to accomplish with it.
Yeah, it's super interesting, and I don't envy that job, because that job can be a lot of fun. But obviously, you need to know your world really well, and also the fact that, you know, obviously a lot of liberty was granted to you as a writer. And let's be realistic. I mean, 5 pages is not a lot, but if he's not paying attention, you could do a lot of damage to the other 14 or 15 stories in 5 pages. I'm just saying that.
Yeah, I mean, you know, a writer could want to kill somebody off, and, well, you know, if that's not part of Brian's plan, well, that doesn't exactly work, right?
So I mean, I think it's really, really fascinating, and I think that people really like this, because obviously the MCU does a really good job with their world connecting, and obviously they're on phase 4 now, and obviously with everything that's going on with Disney Plus, and even the fact that WandaVision and Winter Soldier and the Falcon are leading into a bunch of their movies, and then movies are leading out into other shows. Very, very, very complicated to build a world like that. And obviously I think that this is something that people want. And I think you know it's super smart as a creator, because now fans become invested. And so I think you know, your worlds more so. Obviously the other day I just had Santi and Phoenix on, and they have Siren's Battle of the Bards. And that is a D&D E5 campaign or 5e campaign. And that entire book is a gigantic world that you could play, you know, Dungeons and Dragons in, essentially. And I'm oversimplifying it for a reason, but it's a vast world. And so I just love this concept. And then I think it's awesome, this entire project. And even just the idea of it, because I think this is where people want to go with comics.
And I hope that, you know, I hope they embrace it. What I hope personally We have 135 backers, I believe, last time I checked. I hope that they are people that want to be involved in the project going forward. You know, I hope that it's not just people that are like, oh, well, I like this creator, so I'm going to back this project. And if they're not involved, then maybe I don't like it. I mean, some of that you have to get on board. But then going forward, I hope that they love what we do and that they're invested in this universe. And then so going forward, they're a fan of just Kara Prime, you know, not just necessarily the creator involved.
Yeah, and I think that's something that's very tricky about anthologies. So I am guilty of this, and I'm the first person that I back certain people's anthologies. So like 1 or 2 or 3 people in it. You know, Travis knows I'm going to say this, but I backed Travis's project because I know Travis, I know Chuck Pino, I know Russell Nolte was in there, and then I think Dan Mendoza was also in there, and I just knew the 4, and I was like, man, how bad can this book be with those 4 in there?
Yeah.
Which is legitimately a fair argument, I think.
Yeah.
Saying that, wait a second, I know 3 out of these 4 people. I know they're fantastic writers. This book can't fail. It was my theory. And I was like, okay, I don't know anybody else. I don't care. I read it digitally. I didn't even take it out of the box because it's a beautiful book. And I was happy and I was very, very satisfied with it, which makes sense. And so there are certain people, like when I read this, obviously I'm interviewing you, but I know Travis is involved. And I'm like, well, this book can't suck that bad.
But then from there, you get introduced to other creators. And then hopefully, you know, you latch on to somebody else. And you're like, okay, well, I really like how this person wrote for this character. And then you can, you know, yeah, that's the beauty of the indie comic scene is that I'm guilty of it too. I back certain creators that, you know, regardless of what they're doing. But I've also backed projects that I had no idea about. And then they've become some of my favorites. So that's the beauty of the indie scene.
I'm the worst because I usually interview the person before I back. So
well, that's the safe way to go.
So I'll quickly explain that theory because it's super interesting. So I find that I come across people's Kickstarters. I'm like, man, this thing looks awesome. But I'll interview them first to get a better idea, and then I'll back their project as a thank you for being on my show. So it's one of those things where I take a very different approach, but I also go through Kickstarter and I'm like, man, this art looks awesome. And some of the art on Kara Prime looks really, really cool. And so obviously this is just some of it where this is nothing spoiler, but as you can see, there is a bunch of different art styles being done in this. There's a bunch of different cool stuff going on. And I mean, just everybody could take a glimpse of that. It is a very, very, very interesting book to that degree as well, where there is a bunch of different art styles and there's a bunch of different things that are going on, a bunch of different character designs, a bunch of different characters coming from a variety of different places as well. So like I find that there's something for everybody to identify with in this book as well.
Yeah, there's absolutely an eclectic mix. I mean, you know, you have so many different writers, so many different artists involved.
And even so many people from so many different walks of life, where you have people from Marvel, you have people from Scout, I think, are involved. Obviously, Travis, you know, I hate to single out Travis here, but he's been singled out in the last 3 weeks because everybody apparently knows Travis and Chuck Pino. If you don't know who either one of those are and you're writing indie comics, there's a bigger problem here. But anyway, one of the things is that you have big indie names also, and everybody on this book, I feel, has a different writing style. And then we have somebody like you who's brand new to this. And that's...
You don't know what I'm going to do.
And that's the thing that's awesome is that, you know, and you come from a very interesting background. You're obviously a veteran. And so you have that background to add into this book. And I don't know what other people's services, thank you for your service, might I add. But this idea is that you have that walk, and that's also projected in Blacksmith to some degree. And so a lot of different things are being circled around in this book, and it's super, super interesting when you even have the amount of experience in this book from all walks, because obviously, and I say this with all the respect, but nobody knows what you're going to do. And this is like going to be their first experience of saying, oh man, we're actually picking up this book and this is going to be awesome. And who knows? You could be like the next big thing, or people say, man, that was actually really good. And
I
so
hope
that's
people enjoy it
cool.
at least. Yeah.
And so what is that like to be in a book with so much experience associated with it, from the top up all the way to the bottom, and on every single rung? There is so much there.
It's humbling. It's I'm flattered to be involved with this, because there's no question when you look at this name of lists, I'm a nobody on it. This is literally the first thing I've done from a publishing standpoint in the comics world. I've been a collector for really only for like 4 years. So my involvement in the world of comic books isn't that long, but yeah, I feel like the amount, and it's all social media based, the amount of people I've met and the friendships I've developed just over, the electronic media is staggering over this short period
It's
of time.
crazy. So I'll even attest that and add to it. Last year from March 25th to December, and I think I stopped like a week before Christmas, I did 90 interviews with wrestlers, voice actors, cosplayers, and a lot of indie comic people. And the amount of people I know because of that is insane. And the amount of people that I've connected with, it is crazy how many people you start connecting with when you start getting involved in this industry and getting involved in a variety of other components in indie comics and mainstream comics as well. And this year, Friday's going to be my 59th interview in 4 months. I'm really upset. I didn't get to 60. It's very frustrating. I'm one shy of 60.
Well, you still have Thursday if you can push something through. I can get you someone from Cara Prime for Thursday.
I think my parents would kill me. I think my parents would kill me because they've clearly tolerated me enough. I have a contract with them, and I'm pushing it already on Friday. But not opposed for volume 2, or if they got another project going on, absolutely would love to have more people on. So I love interviewing everybody. But having said that, it's insane who you connect with and what that leads to, and everybody doing projects, and it is wild. And so I agree that in a short amount of time, once you start getting involved, just people connect with each other so quickly.
Yeah, absolutely. And regardless of whether anything comes from this, from my standpoint, I think that this universe and this book is exciting. And I think people are really going to enjoy it.
So I'm actually going to challenge what's going to come out of this a little bit, because I think a bunch of stuff's going to come out of this, because unfortunately it happened to me as an interviewer that getting your first 1, 2, 3, 4, or 10, you got to build out where you're at. And it is, difficult to be first published, whether that's mainstream or on Kickstarter. But getting that first one, and obviously the people that are involved in this project, I think it's going to be a real opportunity for you in many ways, because now this book is getting published. It's fully funded. I think it's fully funded, right?
It is fully funded. We were funded in the first 48 hours. We just haven't had much growth since funding. We've gained about $1,600 since funding, but funding is the goal. I mean, that's the key right there.
So, but getting the opportunity, and then also your name is now associated, because obviously certain people who are working on this project are more of a lightning rod than others. But guess what? The book is all bound together, and it's not page by page people are buying. So it is very, very good to that degree, where people are obviously going to get to know your name, and people are obviously going to be getting the opportunity to say, okay, this story is cool. Who is this writer? And given that you're launching your imprint and your comic company, it is a big launching point for you. And it is super important, because unfortunately, it is very hard for indie comic creators to launch out on their own right now. And some can do it and some can't. But in an anthology, it gives a lot of opportunity. Maybe that's also part of the reason why, is that maybe Brian said, hey, I want to give somebody an opportunity who hasn't gotten one. And I know that I was speaking to Unlikely Hero Studios, Lori Foster, and she likes to do that too with her anthologies, where giving somebody a 4-page position who has a good story, who's just starting out, it is super important. And in many ways, I think the industry needs to do that a lot more, because you need to foster the next generation. So that's how I do it.
Well, I'm excited about it. Yeah, I hope people enjoy it. I think they will. I found it was fun to write, and yeah, obviously I have an amazing artist in JT Malloy on the book. So yeah, I'm excited about it.
And so there's just a lot of stuff coming, and obviously there is going to be. I think Brian hinted at this, and I don't think I'm ruining anything inner workings. And if I am, well, so be it. I'll apologize in advance, and then I'll renege my apology and walk it back. But got a feeling Kara Prime 2 is coming at some point, whether it's later this year or in a year from now. Because obviously anthologies work. Anthologies are very cool. Anthologies done the right way, as I always say, Law and Order does it the best way. This is my analogy. This is my second analogy. So when Law and Order launches a new show or a new spinoff, they always use their top show to launch that spinoff because it does it, and then every once in a while they'll weave it back in to that main show or their top show to reboost it up. And that's sort of what I think the anthology, when you have floppies and long-running things coming out, that's what I think is going to be very useful for the anthology. So I'm willing to put money there's going to be a Kara Prime Volume 2.
I agree with you. I think there will be as well.
And so on that note, I kind of want to go through a bunch of stuff that are rewards with this before we talk about your books that are coming out that I know very little about. So obviously you can pick it up digital, the digital version of this book. So that's $10, and that's just straight to your email. So if you're a digital reader or you don't want to spend the $25, and I don't know, is there a variant of this?
There are no variants.
So
there's like a collector's issue that can be slabbed, but otherwise there's no variants.
And then there's obviously the soft cover copy, as well as I believe the digital copy. So you can get a physical copy if you're a physical reader and you like doing that. I think there's a hardcover, right?
There's no hardcover. That's a cardstock cover, so it kind of looks like a hardcover in the picture, but they're all soft covers.
So there we go with that. And then there's a bunch of other things that are out there. And so I'm just going to throw stuff up and see what sticks. Obviously, there's a bunch of sketch stuff that come from Brian. So there is the idea of the blank, handbook, and you can get a profile sketch on it. There's also, the one for Loggerhead that you could also get a sketch on. Then there's some other cool stuff for retailers, or I don't even know if technically if somebody was an eBay seller, I don't know how that would work, but obviously you could get a bunch of them if you want to support indie comics. And if you are a comic shop listening, please consider supporting indie comics. It is super, super helpful. I believe this is the card stock cover, or one collector's preview, I should say.
Yeah, that's the preview issue that can be slabbed and signed, all those sort of things.
And then there's a bunch of other cool stuff that's out there, such as some like original art and things of that nature. And there's a bunch of it, and it all goes at different prices. So obviously some of it's already actually sold. So I'm just showing off everything that's out there. There's also this, which is pretty much a bunch of cool stuff. I think it's just a big bundle that people can get out there. And then there's also even more stuff like this. So if you're sort of into wrestling, this might be for you. I'm just saying. I believe it is a wearable mask. So if you would like to go step in the ring, be my guest. I'm going to state this: getting suplexed hurts. It hurts. Don't ask, don't tell. Just going to drop it. Obviously some more art here as well with some of this stuff. So obviously I just showed a bunch of original art. Original art can be very expensive. I'm just throwing it out there. And this is a really cheap way how to get original art.
Yeah, and a couple of the things are like first appearances of characters. I think one of the pieces is the first appearance of Deadlift, and one of the pieces is a first appearance of Loggerhead, which, for those that don't know, was published by Scout.
So yeah, so that's something to keep in mind, that, and obviously Scout, you said Scout, right?
Yes.
So one of the things about Scout is that Scout is with Lunar as their distributor, and there is stuff going on with Scout, and obviously, as we all know, and I'm on the comic book investing side of things, where, everything is migrating towards TV, movies, web series. And we all know what that means, that if there's some original art that has a first appearance, and then all of a sudden 3 years down the road, Scout, and that character becomes a TV show, whether it's good or not, it's going to be going up in value.
For sure.
So if you are interested in having an appreciation asset, well, maybe you want to do a little homework and you got 3 days to figure it out. This might be a really good way how to get that art while it's cheap. And, for $200 to $300, you might just hit it. And I think you're also getting a bunch of other stuff with the original art too, such as the books and all that stuff.
For those of us that do buy those original panel arts, I mean, $200-$300 is a really good price for that stuff.
So that's something that I want to just throw out there. And then there's also a bunch of add-ons too. Some random, handbooks stuff. So I don't know the full randomness of this, but obviously it's kind of cool that for $10, if you just get the regular soft cover and then you're like, hey, I want some more information on the handbook, you can add a handbook on. I also think that you could add a digital handbook on. Again, if you're a digital reader, you could easily do that. I think this might be one of the more expensive pieces. So I believe this is, Bloody Bayou's first panel appearance. I probably got that wrong. So
Loggerhead's first panel appearance. Yeah.
There we go. Again, I'm not familiar with Loggerhead. I should be, but I'm not. But obviously, as you can see right from this picture, you're getting the original art. I think you're getting a digital version. You're getting the soft cover. You're getting the preview, and you're getting a print with it as well. And so obviously, there's a lot of cool stuff with that. And then the other thing I want to show is just these pins, an enamel pin, because I know a bunch of people are pin collectors and like collecting stuff like that. So obviously
those are limited, so there's only so many of them out there.
Yeah, and I know a bunch of people who collect pins. I have a few pins that I like that I think are cool, and I know there's a bunch of companies that really do that with their characters, and I think this is sort of the last thing with art add-ons as well. So obviously there's a lot of cool stuff that people can pick up. So obviously that's all the rewards. Pretty quickly tackled it. A lot of cool stuff going on with that. So wanted to throw that out there for those who are interested. Again, this thing is fully funded. So obviously this book is happening. And also I will say this is that there is a creator split attached to this book between all the creators as well. So you are very much supporting indie. I'm not breaking anything yet. I'm not like breaking any contracts per se because it's right on the Kickstarter.
No, you're fine.
So obviously I do want to say that when you back this book, and for those who are going to see this, you actually are really supporting indie. It's not like all these people got paid up front. A lot of them donated their time and did it on spec.
Yeah, so I don't think any of us are. None of us did it to try to make money. We all did it to support Brian because he's such a hard worker in this realm, and he's such a great guy to work with. Always enthusiastic, always positive. So we were happy to donate our time to do this.
So what is that like that you're being essentially though having an equal split? Because a lot of time, with anthologies and depending on who is doing it, and people have different page rates, and certain people might be paid more, and there's all politicking, and everybody handles anthologies differently. From what I hear on horror stories, what is it like to, hey, it is we're getting and split on the back end after printing costs, because that's kind of a nice thing where it's saying, hey, I get that you did this on spec with me, and you did it almost, I don't want to say as a favor, but because we like where you're going with this, and that's kind of a nice thing where it's being treated as, a real indie project and an equal project for everybody.
Yeah, I mean, I can only speak to myself and JT. We both came into this understanding that we may not get paid anything on the back end of it, What that means for me, it doesn't mean a whole lot for me because this is my first foray into this realm. JT, he's got his own intellectual property. He does his own thing. I think he did it more as a favor to me than anything else. But when it's all said and done, it's indie creators helping indie creators, and that's kind of the world that I hope we strive to build.
And to even talk about that, because Kickstarter has become very, very complicated. And I think anybody who's been in the space or has been a backer of Kickstarters has come to the realization that, well, Keanu Reeves has come in now with $1.4 million. Scott Snyder did almost $400,000 or maybe $500,000. Todd McFarlane did $5 million on a toy. Charles Soule, Ryan Brown did $120 on curse words. Might have done actually more than that. They probably did more like $130, and then the list can keep going. Obviously I mentioned the person that I interviewed yesterday is over $130,000 on a Dungeons and Dragons book, and while that's not comics, it's a cousin to comics in many ways. And so obviously there are some big players in this sector. And what is that like? That indie's helping indie, because I think that has to be the future to some degree. If indie comics want to fund well and want to, make a dent, because when you have 25 people working together and pushing out a book, that's a hell of a lot more eyes than having 2 or 3 or 4 people pushing out a book. And it makes it more competitive in a lot of ways to get attention if it's done the right way.
Yeah, I agree. Obviously, people are going to back something that Todd McFarlane does or Keanu Reeves does just because it's Todd McFarlane and Keanu Reeves. If Todd McFarlane's name was attached to this project, we'd be into that 100,000s plus realm as well. What it does do is those people that back projects like that, maybe they've never backed a Kickstarter before. So maybe they get an experience with it, hopefully good. And they're like, okay, well, I can accept this platform. I can accept the idea that a project, there's going to be some delay in when I get my project from when I pay for it. And if they can accept that, then they can broaden their own horizons and take out other creators and hopefully get more involved in this.
And also get trust, because quick story is that I got my first Kickstarter I got burned on.
I've been there. Yeah, I've been there myself.
Book took 2 years. No stretch goals that were promised. I knew what happened on the back end where money was being moved around with the guy who was creating an imprint. And anybody who does enough research will, it's not that hard to figure out. Go back 3 years ago and look at what imprint was being out there and look at who's on Indiegogo now. And now I backed the same one. Yeah. I think it wasn't gold, right?
No.
So there we go. That's a code word, and if anybody knows what we're talking about, it's really bad. And I interviewed the woman's project who he basically was printing, which makes it even worse. And she was on my other show. So obviously, it took me 2 years to come back into Kickstarter after that experience.
Yeah, and that's all it takes. Unfortunately, you get burnt once. I mean, I've been burnt on both platforms. To be fair, I've been burnt on the Indiegogo, and I've been burnt on Kickstarter.
It's so weird. I've never been burned on Indiegogo, but then again, I know people on Indiegogo, and I know they're professionals, and they've never burned me, and it's so weird. And I'll give that a back less projects on Indiegogo, but it's so weird. Like, I've never been burned on Indiegogo, but I've only backed like 4 projects on Indiegogo.
Well, I appreciate the security that Kickstarter provides in the sense that if a project isn't funded, you get your money back. Versus Indiegogo, if a project isn't funded, maybe that creator gives you your money back. Maybe they don't.
That is fair. That is fair. But also the people that I back is like a Canaan White type of guy, or there's a few others that I know from a personal position, and I know that they're gonna get their project across the line, even if they're like $2,000 short. I just know it, so I pick and choose who I'm backing on Indiegogo for a reason. I do my homework, but yeah. So I mean, it's kind of, I love the fact that indie is helping indie, And I love the fact that it makes it competitive in many ways. And I said this before on somebody else's who I was interviewing. I said, I think what has to happen in indie is that very much what Image did, where I think indie creators have to bond together and almost create a super imprint where everybody owns their stuff. It's just that it needs to be almost like a marketing conglomerate, because with big names coming in, I think that is the only way to compete in many ways, because more and more big names are coming. No doubt about it.
And that's the goal ultimately of Brian, not necessarily to create an imprint, but to create a world where everyone's intellectual property can come in, have some fun, play around, and then just go on their way. And, he's not looking to own anything that somebody else already owns. You know what I mean? He just wants this world where everyone can interact.
Yeah, and I think that that's what needs to happen. In many ways, he created a planet and an environment. There's a few characters in there, and then obviously, hopefully, more characters are going to come in, and then people come in and out, and then it could either be viewed as canon, I guess, in somebody's world, or it could be viewed almost like a one-shot type of thing, depending on whoever's world you're setting up, and then it's going to be super interesting, because obviously, getting your character, if you own another character and it has some success, and then it comes to this and it gets introduced to a whole bunch of new people, they are going to flock to your book, and people are going to flock to that.
Yeah.
And it's just exchanging in marketing. And then it's not like connecting covers, which people do, which is cool. But I think it's going to carry a little bit more significance if your character is actually on the world of Kara Prime.
Yeah, I agree.
And so just even going off of that, with everything that's going on, where do you even think Kickstarter is going? Because obviously I know you're new, and that's why I'm curious, because I find the newest people actually are the closest to it. And I get some people don't want to have predictions. I completely get it.
But I tell you, I may be new to collecting. Only been around for 4 years, but I'm not necessarily new to Kickstarter. I've backed over 70 projects, I think. So Kickstarter is not, well, crowdfunding in general, I should say, not just Kickstarter, is not something I'm new to. And I tell this to anybody that wants to listen. The books I enjoy reading are those books that I've gotten in the crowdfunding realm. Outside of that, in the mainstream, I mean, there's only a few series that I necessarily, or a few writers that I necessarily latch onto and really enjoy everything they do. So
it's so weird. It's so weird. Mainstream. I am so old school. I enjoy things from like the 90s. Like I'm right now reading a boatload of Batman from like 93 to about 99. I feel like that's like the best 7 years of Batman by Chuck Dixon and like all those people, like Nightfall. Phenomenal.
Well,
and then,
I have a hard time comparing, like Frank Miller's Daredevil to what's going on in today's world. It's difficult to reach back and compare stories, and some of that is just the political climate we live in.
So I find some of the stuff like I find the 7-year run, which is Nightfall and No Man's Land and that stuff. I find that to not be in any time. Where what I find that to be, and the reason why is that we're now in a very situation where we're in a very, obviously Nightfall is the entire Bane story, and it goes back to what happens when you're, I guess, icon superhero and your protector of Gotham, who's a vigilante's back breaks. I know, spoiler alerts, guys. I know. It's only 27 years old. I think it's 28 years old though, technically. But anyhow, like I find that core story is still relevant in society. And then I find that even fighting for Gotham when everything goes to hell, what do you do? And so I find that stuff. But I agree that certain things, like, the death of Superman, well, that political climate is long gone. I find that much harder to relate to. But like the Batman stuff, I find is so relevant now, and I feel like it's timeless. But that's just my opinion. And then I also think that some of the stuff with, Frank Miller's, Dark Knight, phenomenal.
Yeah.
That's timeless too. But I agree about the Daredevil stuff from back in the day, because things have changed. I mean, look at Law and Order. Law and Order season 10 of SVU so different than season 18. And that's 8 years. In 8 years, so much changed just in a television show. So it's kind of crazy looking back, but I digress. Because I do want to talk about Rabbit Rhino comics, and so I have to ask, why the rhino?
Rhino just happens to be my favorite animal. I'm a veterinarian by trade. That's my profession. And I've done a lot of work with wildlife medicine and in zoos and things. So I've done rhino conservation. And for whatever reason, rhinos just, it's always stuck with me as being a fun animal.
So I love, all jokes aside, I actually enjoy this logo. I like the fact that it was like a badass charging rhino. Rhinos charge, right?
Absolutely. Absolutely. And I just added the word rabbit just for a little alliteration, really. You know, it's Rabbit Rhino Comics. It kind of rolls off the tongue. And that design actually was created by an artist friend of mine, Ted Morey. I gave him like a preliminary sketch of kind of what I was looking for, and he took it and ran with it. And yeah, I'm really happy with the design.
And so obviously, I just threw my logo up there. I have a little tiny elf for those who are interested in knowing that. You know, I went a very different route. I decided that I view my company as a badass company. I went the cute route, but that's how I go.
She's a badass elf.
She's adorable and it's funny. It's supposed to be copying Heim-chan from Crunchyroll to some degree, but I digress right there. But what type of comics are you going to be publishing that are sort of written out? Because you got some stuff written out, but it's obviously not yet.
I have a few scripts done, and it's just I don't want to rush it. I want to take my time with it, and I want to be ahead of myself. So I'm an Army officer. That's my day job, and obviously that keeps me pretty busy. So you could say I'm procrastinating a bit, but I'm really just trying to set it up for success down the road. My flagship story.
This is your retirement plan. That's what's going.
Yeah, I mean, I'll retire here in a few years. So if it's not going by then, it'll go shortly after that. But yeah, my flagship story, you know, they say write what you know. So the character happens to be an Army veterinarian. I'm not going to get into his power set or anything yet.
Also, so that there's going to be powers involved, and there's going to be cool stuff, and
ultimately, it's a team building situation where this character, you know, gets recruited by an agency, and you know, there's other characters that are in that agency. So
all the secret agencies that are fictional, right?
Absolutely. So that one's written, and then I have like a space cowboy sort of story. Is
his name Maurice?
No, he's not. It's not Maurice.
I can't help this. You're like giving me so much opportunity to make so many jokes out of nowhere. Please.
That's fine. I understand your jokes. I mean, you know, there may be kids that were born in the late 90s listening that don't understand.
Hey, I'm 28 and I know all this stuff. So I technically grew up. I was born in 93. So you know, if I know these jokes, it just means those kids are uncultured.
Yeah, their parents served them poorly, right? Because my kids would know.
Their parents' fault, you know. You can't blame your parents for everything, but that's something you can blame your parents for.
Absolutely. So that one's written, and then I may be collaborating a little bit with some friends of mine on a kind of like a witch's coven sort of story.
And so obviously this is something that's going to be taking off relatively soonly, hopefully. And obviously none of this stuff's in the works is what I'm going at.
Yeah,
so,
absolutely.
Yeah. So yeah, no, I'm excited for it because I definitely want to know this Army story. I like military books. I like war stories. I'm a big anime fan. I'm a big Gundam fan. And so I love stuff like that. I love military anime as an individual because I just think it's awesome. And I think Japan's take on military stuff and their reaction of us dropping a bomb on them is so interesting with anime. It is a whole philosophy, and we could probably speak about that for the next 2 hours and not be anywhere close to unpacking it. So we're not going to go down that rabbit hole.
But if you're interested, I mean, like, obviously the military veterinarian's got the military side of it, but even the space cowboy story, going back to writing what you know, there's a lot of military aspects to it, because the captain, he's a military man, he's got PTSD, so and he's just trying to do the right thing, basically, and it's an interesting story that needs to be a little fleshed out, and maybe
I got your perfect quote for the back of the book, and you can feel free to steal it. Captain Harlock meets Cowboy Bebop.
Well, yeah, there could be a little bit of both that. So.
And Captain Harlock is getting a mainstream comic now, so there you go. So technically speaking, Leiji Matsumoto, just saying. I'm just saying that there could be some of that stuff in there. So obviously a lot of cool stuff. Obviously I think there's going to be, when you launch one or both of these or all three of these books, whether you're kickstarting or going through mainstream publishing or going through self-funding, which is what people do now to some degree. I have a few friends who do that. A lot of cool stuff's going to be done in that. So I'm very excited for those projects because that sounds fascinating. All of them sound interesting. The first two definitely piqued my interest, more so because that's more my genre. But yeah, no, that's awesome, and I'm excited for it. So hopefully you're going to do that soon, so I have something to read.
Well, I would like to launch. So this is I'm 44 this year, so this is my favorite number's 4. So this is the year of Staab, is what I've called it. So I'm getting published in the year of Staab. It would be nice to launch my first book in the year of Staab as well. We'll see if it happens.
Yeah, and obviously there's a lot of stuff going on. So I'm not going to push too much further into this. Obviously, we just spoke about Kickstarter, and I do want to talk about my second favorite topic, which is COVID. And obviously, COVID has fucked up a lot of shit. I think it's fair to say, obviously, 2020, March 20, was to now, it's been a year without major cons. Cons are saying they're coming back in the summer. I don't know what that looks like. I hope things do come back. I'm hopefully optimistic, but I think it's safe to say that things are not going to look the same way that they once looked. And obviously San Diego's not happening, and I have a feeling New York Comic Con's not going to happen this year either the same way for a few reasons. I just think that the two places that are not going to be coming back so quickly are California and New York, which got hit really hard. And then when they do come back, conventions, changes has to happen. And so I don't know if you've been to Comic Cons and anime cons and pop culture cons, and I'm going to take a faith, but say you've never worked at a con in a booth, I think is a fair assumption. But what do you think needs to happen for cons to be safe and to be sort of, I guess, healthy again and be responsible? Because whether it's COVID or it's the flu or whether it's the next thing, I don't know if 50,000 people will want to be in the same room breathing down each other's neck, groping each other.
Well, I mean, even before COVID, there's always this idea of con funk or con sickness.
If you go and you feel fine on Thursday, you go to the con, you're all excited, you're starting to feel a little wheezy on Saturday, you're going to tough it out, and then you're on your way home Sunday and you call in sick on Monday, true. Probably caught it from the con.
Yeah, so I went to the last big con before everything happened. So I was at C2E2 in February. I came home and I was sick as hell for like 2 weeks.
You probably had COVID.
Maybe I did. They didn't want to test me at the time because it was still early on in the process. They didn't decide to test me until I was past all my symptoms and basically healthy from the thing. So what happened there? What needs to happen going forward is, I think, at the very least, I think everyone should be wearing masks. We should, have some hand sanitizer
for a while. At least.
Yeah, well, I mean, even if they mandate it going forward, you're going to cut down on some of those aerosolized infections that happen. I mean, yeah, everyone wearing masks we've had COVID throughout the last year, but no one ever talked about flu and the numbers that had fallen off for flu because everyone's wearing masks and washing their hands, doing all these public health things that they're supposed to be doing. And to be fair, I am a public health professional. I have a master's in public health, so I can talk about this all day. We can go anywhere you want to go with as far as
So I guess where I'm curious is that because what I've spoken about and I've asked so many people this, and some people say, well, less attendance, allowing less people in the dealer's room or allowing less people in the panel room or for panels or spacing people out. Well, where maybe if you have celebrities, you have 3 celebrities in one of those big panel rooms, and you have people sort of spaced out and lined up in between, and that you have less interaction, you have testing, more, you have a variety of other tools. I don't know what other tools there are. Maybe, less bigger cons, and you have, a bunch of smaller cons pop up, because if you only have 1,000 people at a convention, chances are that there's going to be less people infected if there's a problem, or less spreading, or there's going to be more room for people. I've been at a con where there's 700 people there over 2 days. And I had a great time. It was an awesome convention, but it's the idea that there was a lot more room to maneuver. You could actually walk down the aisle and not bump into somebody, and you could actually talk to the creator. I had a great conversation for 30 minutes with Scott Lobdell, who basically did Generation X and wrote a bunch of cool stuff for Marvel and all sorts of cool stuff. So obviously, that's what I've heard. So I'm curious where you even think on modification on that, because there are consequences for those modifications, but if it's a better experience and there's more value added, I mean, it's super interesting. So that's kind of where I'm curious, because everybody has a different view on it.
20, 30 years ago, you could do that because you could get these larger names at a con and not have to pay them exorbitant amounts of money. But if you want to get a Todd McFarlane or a Jim Lee to a con,
or a J. Scott Campbell, you need to make it.
You're going to have to pay them. So if your answer is less people at the con, then those cons are making less money, and they can't afford to get the people there that you want to see.
It's complicated because with J. Scott Campbell, I don't know if a con pays him, but he's very particular where he shows up, because he charges $30 an autograph on a graded book, and nobody really gets a not graded J. Scott Campbell book. Everybody gets it CGC'd, and it's $30. And I'm happy to pay my $30 because I like his autograph, and I know that I could sell it for a lot more. So if he's making money and I'm making money, nobody's complaining. If everybody's making money in the room, everybody's happy. Yeah. Even if it's a little bit of money.
So where is that balance to how many people need to come to this con so everyone's making money?
And so, because that's something that I have too with celebrities, because celebrities, I don't know if you know this, but they're guaranteed a certain amount of money. Yeah. So a celebrity might be guaranteed $50,000. And this is what's ludicrous, is that you pay for a ticket. Your ticket pays for 3 things. I have an article up on my website that nobody's read that breaks this down, and I refer to it so often, and I just stopped referring to it. And where your ticket pays for the venue, it pays for all the volunteers and their shirt and maybe their meal for the thing, and maybe if the con with certain people is giving them a hotel, it covers that, and it also pays for the guarantee of the celebrity if they don't make their guarantee for whatever reason. And so every time you buy an autograph from a celebrity for $50, all of a sudden that's counting against their guarantee. They already been paid, or they're going to be guaranteed to be paid, but that counts against their guarantee. So if they guarantee is $50,000 and they make $100,000, they make $100,000. The con doesn't pay them a dime. But if they only make $49,000, the con will make up the difference. And sometimes the con will be happy to make up the difference because they understand that, well, they made, $300,000 collectively, and if they have to give the celebrity an extra $1,000 out of their pocket, it's a no-brainer to make a little bit more money. So it's all going to depend on them too, I think, on what celebrities are comfortable with.
Yeah, absolutely.
And so, yeah. Sorry, what were you saying?
I was saying, it's a delicate balance as to how large these cons have to be to get those big name marquee, people to show up.
And then also, when Stan Lee was alive, I don't think a con necessarily paid him, but he was charging so much money that it's a no-brainer, or they might have just waived his, setup fee, and they might have covered it beyond that, but they might not have paid him like $100,000, because when you're charging $120 an autograph, there you go. So you're making your money hands down. Most disturbing thing I've ever seen at a con, and I was a part of it, so I know all about it. Very disturbing, that entire experience. It makes a slaughter factory look clean. Very, very odd position to happy I did it. Really odd experience. But anyway, I digress.
You're talking about getting a signing from Stan Lee in the latter parts of the dime.
Oh, very, very dark.
Yeah.
Very makes a slaughterhouse look clean.
Yeah, I've heard that from many people before. I mean, I too regret that I didn't have the opportunity, but at the same time,
I don't regret it. I'm glad I did.
I know what you mean. I would have loved the opportunity as well, but yes, you have to ask yourself, at those later years. I mean, where were things at, and who was responsible for?
It was dirty, but necessity, because the book I got signed. The person I want on it, 44, and that's a code for something in that book. If signed by Obama, will be a very, very cool book. And the entire team, and with Stan Lee signing it, it's a very cool book. And so that it's a project, and I'm working on it. So obviously, having said all that, I do want to give you an opportunity to self-promote. So obviously, where can people find you? I know it's a hard transition. Out of COVID into self-promotion. Out of COVID into Stan Lee into self-promotion. It's clearly. That's a real linear delusion. No soft transition right there. But anyhow, I do want to give you the opportunity to promote yourself. So where can people find the Kickstarter? I know the link's up above. I think I put the link up above. I think I did that. But and then secondly, if it's not, I'll put in the link after this. But obviously, where can people find it for those who want to support Kara Prime and back that project? Where can people follow you on social media, Twitter, Facebook, Instagram? And obviously, what do you want to let people know what's next for you?
Sure. So Kickstarter is where Tales from Kara Prime are. So if you can follow the links, you can go onto the Kickstarter site and just type in Tales from Kara Prime, or even if you just type in Kara Prime, and that's Kara Prime. I know you've shown a lot of the stuff, but it's Kerra. We would absolutely love the support and backing. As far as myself, I'm pretty easy to find on Facebook. Dustin Staab, look me up. There's only a couple of us, and you'll know which one's me because you'll just look at the page and it's all comic book related, because that's all I talk about on Facebook and stuff. And Rabid Rhino Comics is as well on Facebook. But as these pages go with Facebook, you probably won't ever see a post from that page unless you actually go to the page, because I don't pay to have stuff published and promoted. So
yeah, it's tricky. It's tricky. You gotta like the page, you gotta follow the page. It's super, super interesting, and the more active you go to that page, the more it's going to be in your algorithm. But that's a whole different ballgame on Facebook and promotion and all sorts of stuff. So that's a whole different podcast for a whole different way. There's so many people who are more experienced than that. Find a who, not a how, is what I say on Facebook promotion. But on that note, I'm going to say you have to support indie. That means that if you like an indie creator, you should back their project. If they're an anthology, back that project. Share their project. If they have books outside of that you can get either on their website or through them or in other fashions, obviously you should go buy their books. It is super important to do that, because this book couldn't have been made without fans actually saying, hey, I'm willing to throw $10, $15, $25 or more, or get a piece of original art that helped fund the book. And so that is super important. And if you are in a situation where money's tight, because let's be realistic, COVID has been a very tough situation for a lot of people. I completely get it, and please take care of yourself. Make sure that your wife, husband, boyfriend, girlfriend, cat, dog, goldfish, yes, goldfishes have feelings too. If you got kids, make sure your kids are good. Also make sure your rent's paid, your mortgage is paid, make sure you got electricity, water, food, shelter, and also make sure you're good for the next month because, again, while things I think are getting better right now, I do think it is a long road out of recovery, and make sure that you are in a position financially to deal with that. And don't be backing people's projects if you are in a rough financial situation. Instead, what you should be doing is following people on social media, sharing Kickstarter, sharing projects, liking people's Instagram, Twitter, liking their Facebook page, sharing their Facebook page. Obviously, if you know somebody who's into this type of thing or into a heavy metal type book, send them the link to the Kickstarter. You got 3 days to do it, and they just might back it, and they're going to get a cool project, and it goes a long way because if all of a sudden, 10 people back it, that's $250 at the softcover rate. So that's something to keep in mind, that sharing something can be just as effective as backing it. But if you do have the money, back it and share it because it will make a difference. And if you back it on Kickstarter, automatically you can tweet it out and share it to Facebook. And Kickstarter makes it super simple with a few clicks of a button. So there's no excuse not to share what you back. And on that note, I am going to give you the final word.
No, I think you've nailed it. I mean, those shares, for being on this end of it for the first time, I can really see and appreciate how much those shares are. Even if you can't back the project, if it's something you're interested in, people are interested in it, share it out in the world because people get tired of seeing me post about it. People get tired of seeing Brian post about it. But if other people are posting about it and there's a hype around it, then we're getting in front of people's faces that we as the creators don't necessarily get in front of everybody's face. So those shares are critical and super important, and I can't understate it enough. So please share the project, even if you're not able to back it yourself.
And on that note, again, I'm going to just echo it, even though it's not the final word, technically I'm stealing it. You got to share it. It goes so far. And I've been saying it for almost 13 months now in a row, and I'm going to keep saying it because a share goes so far. And on that note, that is a wrap.
Thanks.